Welcome back. Before we begin, let me ask you something honestly. How many times have you understood everything in English? Every word, every sentence. But when it was your turn to speak, your mind went quiet. You knew the language, but it didn't come out naturally. If that sounds familiar, you are exactly where you need to be. Today is not about basic English. It's not about textbooks or memorizing long word lists. This is an advanced masterclass designed to help you sound natural, confident, and genuinely fluent. The kind of English real people use when they are relaxed, thinking fast, reacting in the moment, and speaking without translating in their head. If you're serious about reaching a high level, close to C1 and beyond, this lesson will challenge you in the right way, not by overwhelming you, but by training your ear, your instincts, and your confidence at the same time. As you listen, don't just hear the words. Notice the rhythm. Notice how ideas flow. Notice how phrases connect naturally, without effort. That's what we're building here. And before we go further, if this kind of content helps you, take 1 second to like the video and subscribe to English in Mastery. It tells YouTube to show this lesson to more serious learners like you, and it helps this channel grow. Now, let's begin. At an advanced level, English stops being about correctness and starts being about presence. Native speakers don't plan sentences word by word. They react. They adjust. They feel their way through a conversation. That's the level you're training for now. One of the biggest differences between advanced learners and native speakers is not vocabulary size. It's comfort. Comfort with silence. Comfort with imperfect sentences. Comfort with thinking out loud. Let's start there. In real conversations, people rarely speak in perfect, polished sentences. They pause. They restart. They soften their opinions. They leave thoughts unfinished. And that's not a weakness. That's fluency. For example, instead of saying, "I disagree with your opinion because I believe it is incorrect," a native speaker might say, "I don't know. I kind of see it differently." Or, "I get what you're saying, but I'm not totally convinced." These phrases are not dramatic. They are subtle, but they signal confidence and social awareness. They make conversations smoother and more human. Listen carefully to how softening works. "I think, I feel like, it seems to me, from my experience I could be wrong, but..." These expressions don't weaken your message. They make it more natural. Advanced English is rarely aggressive. It's flexible. Now let's talk about listening at a higher level. At C1 and above, listening is not just understanding words. It's understanding intention, tone, emotion, what is said, and what is implied. When someone says, "That's interesting," they might mean they're curious, or they might mean they disagree politely. Context and tone matter. When someone says, "I'll think about it," that can mean yes, no, or maybe later. Advanced listening means recognizing these signals without needing them explained. So, as you listen in this lesson, ask yourself, what is the speaker really doing here? Are they agreeing, hesitating, changing the subject, or inviting more discussion? This awareness is what separates fluent speakers from textbook speakers. Now let's move into vocabulary, but not the way you expect. Advanced vocabulary is not about rare or impressive words. It's about precise, everyday phrases used at the right moment. Think about these expressions. To be honest, at the end of the day, it depends. I'm not sure that's the best way to look at it. That makes sense. I hadn't thought about it that way. None of these are difficult words, but together, they form the backbone of natural, intelligent conversation. When someone explains an idea and you respond with, "That makes sense," you are signaling understanding and engagement. When you say, "It depends," you are opening space for nuance. This is advanced communication. Now imagine this real-life situation. You're talking with a colleague about working from home. They say, "I think remote work is less productive." Instead of reacting emotionally or staying silent, you say, "I see why you'd say that. But in my experience, it really depends on the person." That one sentence shows listening, balance, and confidence. This is the level we're aiming for. Let's slow down and focus on flow. Native speakers often connect ideas using simple, flexible phrases. Having said that, at the same time, on the other hand, that being said, still, these phrases help you move between thoughts smoothly. They prevent your speech from sounding abrupt or disconnected. For example, "I enjoy working alone." That being said, "I do miss the energy of a team sometimes." Notice how natural that sounds. No complex grammar, just clear structure and rhythm. Now let's address something many advanced learners struggle with: sounding too formal. You might have learned English through academic materials, which means your English is correct but stiff. Real conversations are lighter. Instead of "I am extremely tired due to excessive workload," a native speaker would say, "I'm exhausted. It's been a long week." Shorter, more human, more real. Advanced fluency often means simplifying, not complicating. Let's do a quick mindset reset. You are not trying to impress anyone with English. You are trying to connect. When you focus on connection, your language naturally becomes more fluent. Now, let's talk about thinking while speaking. Native speakers often think out loud. You'll hear phrases like, "Let me put it this way. What I'm trying to say is, how do I explain this?" These are not mistakes. They are tools. They give you time. They keep the conversation alive while your brain organizes ideas. You should use them too. If you forget a word, don't stop. Rephrase. Describe. Keep moving. Fluency is motion. Now imagine you're in a conversation and someone asks for your opinion unexpectedly. You don't need a perfect answer. You can say, "That's a good question. I haven't really thought about it before." But that sentence alone buys you time and sounds completely natural. This is advanced control of conversation, not just language. Before we continue, take a moment and reflect. As you listen, do you feel the tone, the calm confidence? This is the energy you want to absorb. In the next section, we'll go deeper into native listening patterns, how people actually react in real conversations, and how you can train your ear to catch meaning beyond words. Stay focused. Don't multitask. Let this English wash over you naturally. We're just getting started. As your listening skills grow, you begin to notice something important. Native speakers don't always respond with full answers. Very often, they react with short signals that keep the conversation moving. These signals are everywhere in real English, and mastering them will dramatically improve how natural you sound. Listen to phrases like, "Right, exactly, fair enough, I see, yeah, I get that." These responses may seem small, but they do important work. They show attention. They show understanding. They invite the other person to continue. Advanced speakers use them instinctively, without thinking. Now imagine someone is explaining a problem at work. You don't interrupt with a long sentence. You nod and say, Right. Or, that makes sense. This tells them you're engaged. This is conversational intelligence. At higher levels, English is as much about timing as it is about language. Another pattern you'll hear constantly in native speech is hesitation used strategically, not out of fear, but out of thoughtfulness. Well, I mean, actually, these words are not fillers in the negative sense. They help speakers soften ideas, correct themselves, or shift direction. For example, I thought it would be easy. Well, easier than it actually was. Or, it's not that I dislike it. I mean, it's just not my thing. This kind of self-adjustment sounds natural because real thinking is messy. Fluent speakers allow that messiness to appear in their speech. Now let's talk about listening for structure. Even casual English follows patterns. When people tell stories, they often follow a loose structure without realizing it. They set the scene. They describe a problem or situation. They react emotionally. They reflect. For example, last week, I was stuck in traffic for over an hour. It was one of those days where everything just felt slow and frustrating. I was already tired. And, honestly, it really tested my patience. But in the end, I just put on a podcast and tried to relax. This is not formal storytelling, but it's clear, engaging, and easy to follow. As a listener, recognize these stages. As a speaker, mirror them. This will make your English sound organized without sounding rehearsed. Now, let's focus on vocabulary that shows maturity and balance. Advanced speakers rarely speak in extremes. Instead of always and never, they use softer, more accurate language. Most of the time, in general, from what I've seen, to some extent, more often than not, these phrases reflect real life. Life is rarely absolute, and fluent English reflects that reality. If someone asks, "Do you enjoy your job?" an advanced answer might be, for the most part, yes, it has its challenges, but I enjoy the people I work with. That response feels honest and thoughtful, not exaggerated, not robotic. Now let's move into a very important skill, reacting emotionally in English. Many learners can explain facts, but they struggle to react naturally. Native speakers constantly react with small emotional phrases. That's rough. That's exciting. That must have been stressful. No way. You're kidding. These reactions build connection. They show empathy. They make conversations feel alive. If someone says, "I failed my driving test again," a natural reaction is not silence or grammar. It's emotion. Ah, that's frustrating. I know how that feels. That one sentence builds instant rapport. Now let's combine listening and reacting. When someone talks, listen for emotional cues. Are they proud, tired, annoyed, excited? Then respond to that emotion first, before the content. This is a key difference between fluent speakers and learners. Now let's talk about disagreement, one of the hardest skills to master at an advanced level. Native speakers rarely say, "You're wrong." Instead, they soften disagreement to keep relationships smooth. "I'm not sure I completely agree. I see it a bit differently. That hasn't been my experience. I get your point." But these expressions allow you to disagree without conflict. They show confidence and respect at the same time. Imagine a discussion about social media. Someone says, "Social media is a waste of time." Instead of reacting strongly, you say, "I get why people feel that way, but I think it depends on how you use it." That sentence opens conversation instead of closing it. Now, let's shift into speed and rhythm. Advanced listening requires comfort with fast, imperfect speech. Native speakers often connect words, reduce sounds, and drop parts of sentences. I'm gonna, instead of I am going to, kind of becomes kinda. Want to becomes wanna. You don't need to force these reductions when speaking, but you must recognize them when listening. Otherwise, fast conversations will feel overwhelming. Train your ear by listening for meaning, not individual words. If you miss a word, don't panic. Stay with the sentence. Meaning usually reveals itself by the end. This is a mental shift. You are listening globally, not word by word. Now let's talk about confidence in unfamiliar topics. Advanced speakers are not experts in everything, but they know how to stay engaged even when they don't fully understand. You can say, I'm not very familiar with that, but it sounds interesting. I don't know much about it. How did you get into it? That's new to me. What's it like? These phrases turn confusion into curiosity. They keep you in the conversation. Silence caused by confusion is common for learners. Curiosity prevents that silence. Now let's move into storytelling again, but at a slightly higher level. Advanced speakers often add reflection to their stories. So yeah, that experience really changed how I look at things. Looking back, I probably learned more than I expected. At the time, it didn't seem important, but now I see it differently. These reflections show depth. They make your English sound thoughtful and mature. Practice adding one reflective sentence to your stories. It transforms simple experiences into meaningful communication. Now, pay attention to how native speakers end thoughts. They often trail off naturally. And yeah, that was pretty much it. So, lesson learned. Anyway, it worked out in the end. These endings feel relaxed. They signal completion without sounding formal. Now let's talk briefly about energy. Fluent speakers adjust their energy depending on context. Casual conversations are lighter. Professional conversations are calmer and more measured. Social conversations are expressive. Listen to how your tone changes. Match the energy of the person you're speaking with. This is called conversational alignment, and it's a powerful skill. Finally, let's reinforce something important. You don't become fluent by waiting until you're ready. You become fluent by speaking while you're still unsure. Every advanced speaker you admire once struggled with hesitation, mistakes, and self-doubt. What separates them is persistence, not talent. As you continue listening to this lesson, allow your brain to absorb patterns. Don't analyze every sentence. Trust exposure. Trust repetition. In the next part, we'll move deeper into real-life listening scenarios, including subtle responses, indirect answers, and how to read between the lines in everyday English. Stay present. Stay relaxed. Keep listening. Now let's go deeper into something that truly defines advanced English indirect communication. Native speakers often do not say exactly what they mean in a direct, obvious way. Instead, they imply, soften, or hint. If you can understand this level of meaning, your listening ability will move much closer to C2. Let's start with indirect answers. Imagine you ask someone, "Did you like the presentation?" They reply, "Well, it was definitely interesting." That response may sound positive, but it's actually neutral. It could even be slightly negative. If they truly loved it, they might say, "I really enjoyed it," or "It was great." Indirect language allows people to stay polite while expressing uncertainty or mild disagreement. Here are more examples you'll hear all the time. It's not exactly what I expected. That's one way of looking at it. I wouldn't go that far. I'm not sure it worked as well as planned. None of these are aggressive, but they clearly signal hesitation or doubt. Advanced listening means catching that signal without needing it spelled out. Now let's talk about polite avoidance. Native speakers often avoid saying no directly, especially in social or professional settings. Instead of no, I can't, they might say, I'll have to see. I'm not sure I'll be able to. I've got a lot going on right now. Let me get back to you. These are soft refusals. If you take them literally, you might wait forever. Advanced understanding means recognizing when maybe really means probably not. This is not dishonesty. It's social balance. Now let's shift into how advanced speakers manage conversations they want to exit or redirect. Imagine you're talking to someone, and the topic is dragging on. A native speaker might say, "Anyway, long story short, getting back to what we were saying, that reminds me." These phrases gently move the conversation forward without sounding rude. For example, "Anyway, I should probably get back to work." This signals closure without abruptness. Now let's focus on reactions that show emotional intelligence. Advanced speakers respond not only to words, but to feelings. If someone says, "I finally finished that project," the response is not just, "Okay," it's, "That must be a relief. You must feel good about that. Nice. That's a big milestone." These reactions show awareness and empathy. They deepen connection instantly. Now, let's train your ear for understatement. Something very common in native English. Understatement means intentionally making something sound smaller than it really is. For example, "It wasn't ideal" often means, "It was pretty bad." "I had a bit of a challenge" may mean, "It was extremely difficult." If you miss understatement, you miss meaning. Native speakers often downplay strong emotions, especially in professional or casual settings. Advanced listening means reading between the lines. Now let's move into how people signal uncertainty. Instead of saying, "I don't know," advanced speakers say, "I'm not entirely sure. I could be mistaken. I don't have all the details. As far as I know." These phrases protect the speaker while keeping the conversation open. They sound thoughtful and measured. You should use them too. They allow you to participate even when your knowledge is incomplete. Now let's talk about how native speakers manage disagreement emotionally. They often acknowledge the other person before stating their own view. "I see where you're coming from. That's a fair point. I get why you'd think that." Then comes the shift. "But I still think, having said that, from my perspective." This structure keeps conversations respectful and productive. Let's build a real example. Someone says, "Working long hours shows commitment." You respond, "I get why people see it that way. At the same time, I think results matter more than hours." This sounds balanced and confident, not confrontational. Now let's focus on advanced listening in fast, real environments. In real life, people interrupt each other slightly. They overlap. They react mid-sentence. This is not rude. It's engagement. You'll hear things like, "Yeah, exactly. Right. Right. I know what you mean." These short interruptions show alignment. As a listener, don't be confused by overlap. As a speaker, don't panic if someone reacts before you finish. It's normal. Now let's move into a real-life scenario. Imagine you're in a casual meeting. Someone says, "We might need to rethink the timeline." Another person replies, "Yeah, That's probably a good idea. Notice how probably softens agreement. It keeps space for discussion. Advanced English lives in these small words. Now, let's talk about how native speakers express doubt without negativity. I'm a bit skeptical. I have some reservations. I'm not fully convinced. These phrases express concern without conflict. If you use them, your English sounds mature and professional. Now let's address something important: sounding natural without copying accents. You don't need to imitate someone's accent to sound fluent. Focus on clarity, rhythm, and stress. Native speakers stress important words and reduce unimportant ones. Listen to this sentence. I didn't really expect it to turn out like that. The stress falls on didn't. Really? Expect. Turn out. This stress pattern carries meaning. As you listen, notice stress more than pronunciation. Now let's talk about silence again, but at a higher level. Advanced speakers are comfortable pausing before answering serious questions. A pause shows thoughtfulness. You might hear, "That's a tough one. Let me think about that for a second." These phrases give you space. Use them. Silence is not failure. Silence is control. Now let's move into how people naturally summarize. Instead of repeating everything, native speakers say, "So basically," in short, at the end of the day. These phrases signal conclusion and clarity. They're powerful tools for structuring speech. Now, take a breath. Notice how all of this English feels calm, measured, and human. There's no rush, no performance, just connection. In the next part, we'll move into longer, real-life listening moments. How people narrate experiences naturally, and how you can train yourself to respond without planning every sentence. Stay with it. Let your brain adapt. This is how advanced fluency is built. Now we're going to slow things down even more and focus on something that separates strong C1 speakers from truly advanced ones: responding without rehearsing. This is where English starts to feel automatic, not forced. In real conversations, native speakers rarely plan their responses in advance. They listen, react, adjust, and keep moving. Their responses are shaped by the moment, not by memorized structures. Let's talk about reactive language. Reactive language is what you say immediately after someone speaks. It's not a full answer. It's the bridge between listening and responding. You'll hear phrases like, "Yeah, I know what you mean. That's true. I hadn't thought of it like that. That's interesting." These reactions buy you time and show engagement. They also make conversations feel fluid instead of stiff. For example, someone says, "I've been thinking about changing careers." You don't jump straight into advice. You react first. "Yeah, that's a big decision." That reaction alone shows empathy and awareness. Then you continue. "What made you start thinking about it?" This two-step response is very natural. Reaction first, content second. Now let's talk about pacing your answers. Advanced speakers don't rush to fill silence. They allow a short pause before responding, especially when the topic is personal or complex. A pause followed by, "Yeah, I think for me," sounds far more natural than an instant, perfectly structured reply. Silence here is part of the language. Now let's move into how native speakers handle uncertainty in the middle of speaking. They don't stop. They adjust. You'll hear things like, "It was sort of stressful, but also kind of exciting. I don't know how to explain it exactly. But it wasn't bad. Just different." These phrases show thinking in real time. They signal honesty, not weakness. As an advanced learner, you should allow yourself to sound like this. Polished speech is not always natural speech. Now let's focus on a very common advanced pattern: soft self-correction. Native speakers often correct themselves gently while speaking. I went there last Friday. Or, actually, it might have been Thursday. She was really supportive. I mean, more understanding than I expected. Notice how natural that feels. There's no apology, no embarrassment, just adjustment. You should do the same. If you say something slightly wrong, continue smoothly. Don't stop the conversation to fix yourself unless it's necessary for clarity. Now let's talk about narrative depth. Advanced speakers don't just say what happened. They include context and reaction. Instead of, "I changed jobs last year," they say, "I changed jobs last year. I wasn't really happy where I was, and I felt like I needed something more challenging." This adds motivation. It invites response. Now let's build a longer, realistic example. Imagine someone asks, "How did you end up living here?" A natural advanced response might be, "Well, it wasn't exactly planned. I originally came for work, just for a short project. But I ended up really liking the pace of life here. Over time, it just started to feel like home." Notice the structure. No complicated grammar, just clear ideas, connected naturally. Now let's talk about emotional honesty. Native speakers often express uncertainty openly. "I wasn't sure how I felt about it at first. It took me a while to get used to it. I had mixed feelings. To be honest." These phrases show emotional intelligence. They make your English sound mature and real. Now let's move into something subtle but powerful emphasis. Advanced speakers emphasize ideas with intonation and simple intensifiers. Really, actually, honestly pretty. For example, "I was actually surprised by how well it went. It was pretty challenging at first." These words are small, but they add color and authenticity. Be careful not to overuse them. 1 or 2 per thought is enough. Now let's talk about follow-up questions. A key skill for advanced conversation. Instead of changing topics quickly, native speakers stay with the current one a little longer. They ask, "How did that make you feel? What was the hardest part? Would you do it again?" These questions deepen the conversation. If someone says, "I moved abroad last year," a weak response is, "Oh, nice." A strong response is, "That's a big move. What was the hardest part at the beginning?" This shows curiosity and presence. Now let's shift to how people express limits. Advanced speakers set boundaries politely. "I'm not completely comfortable with that. I'd rather not get into that. That's not really something I want to discuss." These phrases are calm and respectful. They protect you socially without sounding defensive. You should know them and feel comfortable using them. Now, let's talk about how people slow conversations down. Sometimes, conversations move too fast. Advanced speakers know how to slow things gently. Can you clarify what you mean by that? Just to make sure I understand. When you say that, do you mean? These phrases show care and professionalism. They prevent misunderstandings. Now let's revisit listening again, but from a deeper angle. Advanced listening means noticing shifts in tone. When someone's voice drops, slows, or becomes quieter, the topic is usually more serious. When it speeds up, they may be excited or nervous. Pay attention to these signals. They guide your response. Now let's address a common advanced fear: sounding boring. Many learners worry they don't have interesting things to say, but interest comes from engagement. not stories. If you respond thoughtfully, ask good questions, and react emotionally, you will never sound boring. You don't need dramatic stories. You need presence. Now take a moment and reflect on how this English feels. Calm, controlled, flexible. In the next part, we'll focus on how native speakers handle everyday pressure situations, unexpected questions, quick decisions, and spontaneous reactions, all while staying natural and composed. Keep listening. Let this style sink in. This is how advanced fluency feels. Now let's step into situations where English is used under light pressure. Not emergencies, not debates, but everyday moments where you're expected to respond quickly and naturally. This is where many advanced learners still feel tension, not because they lack language, but because they haven't trained spontaneity. Let's start with unexpected questions. In real life, people often ask things without warning. What do you think about it? Have you decided yet? So, what's next for you? These questions don't come with preparation time. Native speakers don't panic. They stall smoothly. Here's how. They use phrases like, "Let me think for a second. That's a good question. I haven't fully decided yet." These responses are not delays. They are part of fluent speech. They give your brain space to form an answer while keeping the conversation alive. Now imagine someone asks, "Would you move abroad if you had the chance?" You don't need an instant opinion. You can say, "I've thought about it before. I think it would depend on the timing." That sounds calm and reflective, not hesitant. Now let's talk about making quick decisions in English. In everyday life, you'll hear, "Does that work for you? Are you okay with that? Should we go with this option?" Native speakers often respond with flexible language. "That works for me. I'm good with that. That should be fine. I'm not completely sure, but I think so." These expressions show cooperation without overcommitting. Now, let's focus on how native speakers express mild hesitation. Instead of saying, "I don't like it," they say, "I'm not totally sold on it. I'm on the fence. I have mixed feelings." These phrases are advanced because they communicate complexity. Real opinions are rarely simple. Now imagine a group discussion. Someone says, "Let's meet at 7 a.m." You reply, "That's a bit early for me. To be honest, would 8 work instead?" That response is polite, clear, and confident. Now let's talk about pressure in social situations. You might be introduced unexpectedly. "This is Alex. You two should talk." Advanced speakers don't freeze. They start light. "Nice to meet you. How do you know each other? So, what brings you here today?" These are safe, natural openers that work almost anywhere. Now let's move into how people react when they don't hear or understand something. Instead of, what native speakers say, "Sorry, could you say that again? I didn't quite catch that. Can you repeat the last part?" These phrases are polite and confident. They show care for clarity. Never pretend you understand when you don't. That creates more pressure later. Now let's address quick emotional reactions. Real conversations are full of small surprises. "I got the job." "They canceled the event." "We're moving next month." Native speakers react instantly with emotion. "That's great news." "Oh, wow. That's unexpected." "That's a big change." You don't need a long response. Emotion comes first, content later. Now let's talk about handling awkward moments. Awkwardness happens to everyone. Advanced speakers don't try to erase it. They acknowledge it lightly. "Well, that was awkward." "Okay. That came out wrong. Let me rephrase that." These phrases reduce tension instantly. They show self-awareness. Now imagine you say something and realize it might sound rude. You can soften it immediately. I didn't mean it like that. What I meant was... This skill is powerful and very human. Now let's move into managing conversations in groups. In group discussions, advanced speakers know how to enter without interrupting aggressively. They wait for a pause and say, "Can I add something just to build on that? I'd like to jump in here." These phrases are polite and professional. They also know how to exit gracefully. "I'll let you finish. I'll leave it there." Now let's talk about tone under pressure. When people feel rushed, their voice rises. Advanced speakers slow down instead. They lower their voice slightly. They speak with intention. This calm tone signals confidence, even when decisions matter. Now let's address something subtle reacting when you're unsure. Instead of freezing, native speakers stay honest. "I'm not entirely sure yet. I need a bit more time to think about it. I don't have a strong opinion either way." These responses are acceptable. You don't need certainty to sound fluent. Now let's focus on real-life professional English. In meetings, people often say, "Let's circle back to that. Can we revisit this later? I think we're aligned." These phrases manage time and expectations. They're not fancy. They're functional. Now listen carefully. Advanced English is not fast. It's controlled. People who sound fluent are not rushing. They're choosing words that fit the moment. As you continue listening, notice how everything stays calm, even under pressure. In the next part, we'll focus on how native speakers handle everyday conversations that slowly become deeper, more personal, and more meaningful, without forcing intimacy or sounding unnatural. Stay with it. You're training instinct now, not memory. Now let's move into conversations that gradually become more personal. This is where advanced English becomes less about language and more about trust, boundaries, and emotional awareness. Native speakers are very skilled at letting conversations deepen naturally, without forcing anything. At first, conversations stay light. "What do you do? Where are you from? How long have you lived here?" These questions are safe, neutral, but over time, if the connection feels comfortable, the tone shifts. You'll start to hear questions like, "So, what made you choose that path? Was that an easy decision for you? How did that experience affect you?" These are not small talk questions anymore. They invite reflection. Advanced speakers recognize when it's appropriate to go deeper, and when it's not. That sensitivity is part of fluency. Now let's talk about how native speakers share personal information carefully. They often use soft openings. To be honest, I don't usually talk about this. But, if I'm being honest, these phrases prepare the listener emotionally. They signal sincerity. For example, "To be honest, I wasn't very confident at the beginning." That sentence feels real, not dramatic, just honest. Now, let's talk about vulnerability in English. You don't need advanced vocabulary to express vulnerability. You need clarity and calmness. "I was nervous. I wasn't sure I could handle it. I felt overwhelmed at times." These sentences are simple, but powerful. They connect people. Native speakers often balance vulnerability with reflection. "It was stressful, but I learned a lot from it. I struggled at first, but it made me stronger." This balance keeps conversations grounded and mature. Now let's talk about how people respond to vulnerability. They don't rush to fix. They acknowledge. "That sounds really tough. I can imagine that wasn't easy. Thanks for sharing that." These responses show empathy. They build trust. If someone opens up, and you respond with grammar instead of empathy, the moment is lost. Now let's move into how people share opinions on sensitive topics. Advanced speakers are careful with strong language. Instead of, "That's wrong," they say, "I see it a bit differently. I have mixed feelings about that. I'm not sure I fully agree." This keeps conversations respectful, especially when topics matter. Now imagine a conversation about life choices. Someone says, "I regret not traveling more when I was younger." A natural response might be, "Yeah, that's something a lot of people feel later on, but you still have time." Notice the tone, supportive, not dismissive. Now, let's talk about pacing in personal conversations. Native speakers don't rush emotional topics. They allow pauses. They listen fully. They don't interrupt with solutions. If someone pauses mid-sentence, let them. Silence. Here is space, not awkwardness. Now let's focus on storytelling again, but personal storytelling. When people talk about meaningful experiences, they often slow down and simplify language. I remember feeling completely lost at that time. It was one of those moments that really stayed with me. These phrases are not complex. They are emotional. Advanced English becomes simpler as meaning becomes deeper. Now, let's talk about responding when you don't relate. You don't need to pretend you've had the same experience. You can say, "I haven't been through that myself, but I can understand why it was hard. I can't fully relate, but that sounds intense." This honesty builds respect. Now let's move into humor in deeper conversations. Humor is used carefully, light, self-aware, never dismissive. "I guess I learned the hard way." Looking back, it's almost funny now. These lines soften serious moments without undermining them. Now let's address boundaries. Advanced speakers know how to protect their privacy politely. I'd rather not go into details. That's a bit personal for me. I'm still figuring that out. These phrases are calm and confident. No explanation required. Now imagine someone asks a personal question too quickly. You can say, "That's a good question, but I'm not really comfortable answering it yet." That's fluent boundary setting. Now let's focus on how conversations naturally shift back to lighter topics. Native speakers often use transitions. Anyway, on a lighter note, changing the subject a bit. These phrases reset the emotional tone smoothly. For example, "Anyway, enough about work. Have you seen that new series everyone's talking about?" This feels natural, not abrupt. Now, let's talk about emotional intelligence in listening. Advanced listeners notice when someone wants to talk more, and when they don't. Short answers, avoiding eye contact, changing posture. These are signals. Fluent speakers respect them. They don't push. They respond with light comments or change topics. This awareness matters as much as vocabulary. Now pause for a moment. Notice how all of this English feels very human. There's no performance, no pressure, just connection. In the next part, we'll focus on how native speakers navigate everyday, professional, and social environments at the same time, switching tone smoothly and staying natural across different roles. Keep listening. You're training instinct, not rules. Now, let's focus on something that advanced speakers do, almost unconsciously, switching registers. This means adjusting the way you speak depending on where you are, who you're talking to, and what role you're playing, without sounding like a different person. In real life, English is not one fixed style. It's flexible. You don't speak to a close friend the same way you speak to a manager, But fluent speakers don't completely change their personality either. They simply adjust tone, word choice, and structure. Let's look at how this works naturally. In a casual setting, you might say, "Yeah, that works for me. I'm pretty flexible. Let's see how it goes." In a professional setting, the same ideas become, "That works on my end. I'm open to options. Let's take it step by step." Notice the difference. The meaning is the same. The tone is slightly more measured. Nothing dramatic. Nothing forced. Advanced fluency means you can do this without stopping to think. Now let's talk about workplace English that sounds natural, not corporate. Native speakers avoid sounding too formal unless the situation truly requires it. Even in professional environments, English is conversational. Instead of, "I would like to request clarification regarding this matter," they say, "Could you clarify that for me?" Or, "Just to make sure I understand." These phrases are polite, professional, and human. Now let's move into meetings. In meetings, advanced speakers signal agreement and alignment smoothly. "I agree with that. That makes sense to me. I'm on the same page." They also know how to gently express concern. "I have a small concern about the timeline. One thing we might want to consider." These phrases keep discussions productive without tension. Now imagine someone proposes an idea you're unsure about. You don't say no immediately. You say, "I see the value in that. I just wonder how it would work in practice." This shows respect and critical thinking at the same time. Now let's talk about everyday social professional overlap, like chatting with colleagues before or after work. These conversations often start light and move briefly into work topics, then back out again. For example, "Did you have a good weekend?" "Yeah, pretty relaxed. I finally caught up on sleep. How about you?" "Not bad. By the way, are we still meeting tomorrow?" Notice how smoothly the topic shifts. No announcement, no pause, just flow. Advanced speakers move between personal and professional topics like this all the time. Now let's focus on how native speakers manage small misunderstandings. Misunderstandings are normal. Fluent speakers don't dramatize them. They say, "Oh, I think there's been a misunderstanding. I might not have explained that clearly. Let me rephrase." These phrases reset the conversation calmly. Now let's talk about emails and spoken English briefly, because many learners confuse them. Spoken English is usually simpler and more direct than written English. In speech, native speakers say, "I'll send it over later today. Let's touch base tomorrow. I'll follow up on that." These are natural spoken phrases. They sound strange if you try to translate them literally. Now, let's move into decision-making language. Advanced speakers rarely sound absolute. Instead of, "This is the best option," they say, "This seems like the best option for now." Instead of, "We must do this," they say, "I think this might be the right approach." This language leaves room for adjustment. That flexibility is a sign of experience. Now let's talk about confidence again, but in a quiet way. Advanced confidence is calm. It doesn't rush. It doesn't dominate. It sounds like, "I'm comfortable with that decision. I stand by that choice. I'm confident this will work." No extra explanation. No defensiveness. Now imagine you're asked to explain something you know well. Advanced speakers don't overload details. They start with the big picture. So, essentially, what's happening is, then they add detail only if needed. This makes their English clear and persuasive. Now let's focus on listening in mixed environments. In group settings, people may speak differently. Some are direct. Some are subtle. Some speak more, some less. Advanced listeners track the room, not just the words. They notice who wants to speak, who has finished, who is hesitant. They adjust accordingly. Now let's talk about ending professional conversations naturally. Native speakers don't end abruptly. They say, "Thanks for taking the time. This was really helpful. Let's keep in touch." These closings leave a positive impression. Now pause for a moment. Notice how this English feels grounded. Nothing flashy, nothing forced, just practical, adaptable communication. In the next part, we'll focus on how advanced speakers handle opinions, values, and abstract ideas in everyday English, without sounding academic or vague. Stay focused. You're building real-world fluency now. Now let's move into conversations where ideas matter more than facts. This is where advanced English becomes subtle, flexible, and reflective. Native speakers often talk about opinions, values, and abstract topics in a way that feels natural, not intellectual or heavy. At this level, it's not about having the right opinion. It's about expressing your thinking clearly and respectfully. Let's start with how native speakers introduce opinions. They rarely announce them strongly. Instead, they ease into them. "I tend to think that. I've always felt that. For me, it comes down to the way I see it." These openings make your opinion sound personal, not absolute. For example, "I tend to think work-life balance matters more than people admit." That sentence invites conversation instead of argument. Now, let's talk about developing an idea out loud. Advanced speakers don't rush to conclusions. They explore. They say things like, "I'm still figuring out how I feel about it. It's complicated. There's more to it than that." These phrases give you space to think while speaking. Now imagine a discussion about success. Someone says, "Success is about money." A natural advanced response might be, "I get why people define it that way. But for me, success is more about freedom and satisfaction." That response is calm, balanced, and authentic. Now, let's talk about explaining abstract ideas simply. Native speakers avoid heavy language when talking about concepts. Instead of fulfillment is derived from intrinsic motivation. They say feeling fulfilled usually comes from doing things that actually matter to you. Same idea, much more human. Advanced fluency often means choosing clarity over complexity. Now let's move into expressing uncertainty around beliefs. You don't need to sound confident about everything. You can say, "I'm not sure I have a clear answer to that. My views on that have changed over time. I'm still learning about it." These responses sound thoughtful, not weak. Now let's talk about values in conversation. Values often come out naturally through stories. I realized how important family was to me when that experience really changed my priorities. You don't need to declare values directly. Let them show through experience. Now let's focus on disagreement around ideas. Advanced speakers separate people from opinions. They say, "I respect that view. I see why that matters to you. I just don't see it the same way." This keeps conversations safe and respectful. Now, imagine a conversation about technology. Someone says, "Technology is ruining human connection." You reply, "I understand that concern. At the same time, I think it's also creating new ways for people to connect." That's balanced, not defensive. Now, let's talk about nuance. Native speakers use words that soften meaning. Somewhat, relatively, to a certain extent, partially. These words reflect real thinking. For example, I agree to a certain extent, but I think there's more to consider. This shows depth without conflict. Now, let's talk about how people signal reflection. They often pause and say, "Looking back, in hindsight, as I've gotten older." These phrases show growth and perspective. They make conversations richer. Now, let's move into how people respond to big questions. What do you really want in life? What matters most to you? Advanced speakers don't rush answers. They say, "That's something I think about a lot. It's hard to put into words." These responses sound honest and human. Now let's talk about summarizing your thinking. Native speakers often wrap up with, "So for me, at the end of the day, when it comes down to it." These phrases signal closure without sounding final. Now let's focus on tone again. When discussing abstract ideas, native speakers slow down slightly. They choose words carefully. They don't dominate. This calm tone invites dialogue. Now let's address one more important point. You don't need perfect vocabulary to talk about complex ideas. You need structure and sincerity. Simple language, used thoughtfully, is powerful. Now pause and notice how this English feels reflective, not rushed. This is how fluent speakers talk about meaning, not just information. In the next part, we'll focus on how advanced speakers tell longer stories naturally, keep listeners engaged, and hold attention without over-explaining. Stay present. You're building depth now. Now, let's focus on one of the most powerful tools in advanced English, telling longer stories without losing your listener. Native speakers are very good at this. Not because their stories are dramatic, but because they know how to pace information and keep the listener emotionally involved. At an advanced level, storytelling is not about details, it's about direction. Native speakers guide the listener through the experience. They signal where the story is going. They use phrases like, "So the thing is, what ended up happening was, that's when I realized, long story short." These phrases help listeners follow along without effort. Now let's look at how native speakers start longer stories. They rarely jump straight into details. They set context first. Something interesting happened the other day. I had one of those moments last week. This reminds me of something that happened a while ago. These openings prepare the listener. They say, "A story is coming." Now imagine someone asks, "Why did you decide to change careers?" A natural advanced response might begin like this. "Well, it wasn't a sudden decision. It kind of built up over time." That sentence creates anticipation. Now let's talk about pacing. Native speakers slow down important moments and speed up unimportant ones. They say, "I'll skip the boring parts. The details aren't that important." So after a while, this keeps stories focused and engaging. Now, let's move into emotional layering. Advanced speakers include feelings as the story unfolds, not just at the end. I was excited at first, but then I started to doubt myself. At the time, it felt overwhelming. These emotional shifts keep listeners invested. Now let's build a realistic, longer example. Imagine you're explaining a difficult decision. You might say, "I'd been thinking about moving for a long time. At first, it was just an idea in the back of my mind. But then, work started to feel repetitive, and I realized I wasn't growing anymore. That's when it really hit me that I needed a change." Notice how this flows. Simple language, clear direction. Now let's talk about signaling reflection. Native speakers often pause mid-story to reflect. Looking back, that was probably the turning point. At the time, I didn't realize how important it was. These reflections add depth and maturity. Now let's focus on keeping the listener involved. Advanced speakers occasionally check in. You know what I mean? I think you've probably experienced something similar. These are not questions that require answers. They build connection. Now let's talk about endings. Native speakers don't over-explain endings. They let the meaning settle. They say, "And that was that. In the end, it worked out. It taught me a lot." Short, calm, complete. Now let's talk about humor in storytelling. Humor is often subtle and self-directed. Looking back, I probably should have seen it coming. It sounds obvious now. These lines make stories relatable. Now let's talk about what to avoid. Advanced speakers avoid listing every detail. They avoid long explanations that lose energy. If something doesn't serve the story, they leave it out. This is a skill. Now let's move into everyday storytelling. You don't need big events. A story about missing a bus, having an awkward conversation, or making a small mistake can be engaging if told well. It's about how you tell it, not what happened. Now let's focus on listening again. When someone tells you a story, advanced listeners respond with, "That makes sense. I can see why that stuck with you. That must have been a learning experience." These responses show understanding beyond facts. Now let's talk about transitions within stories. Native speakers guide listeners smoothly. So anyway, after that, not long after. These phrases keep things moving. Now pause. Notice how storytelling in advanced English feels relaxed. There's no rush, no performance, just clear, human communication. In the next part, we'll focus on how advanced speakers close conversations and leave strong, natural impressions without sounding scripted. Stay with it. You're nearly there. Now let's focus on how advanced speakers bring conversations to a close in a way that feels natural, respectful, and memorable. Ending a conversation well is just as important as starting it. And it's something many learners overlook. Native speakers rarely end conversations abruptly unless there's urgency. Instead, they signal closure gradually. They use phrases like, "Anyway, I should probably get going. It's been really nice talking to you. I don't want to keep you too long. I'll let you get back to it." These expressions prepare the listener. They give the conversation a soft landing. Now imagine you're chatting with someone after a meeting. You might say, "Well, I should let you get back to your day. It was great talking with you." That feels polite, calm, and professional. Now let's talk about leaving a positive impression. Advanced speakers often end with warmth. "I really enjoyed this conversation. Let's catch up again sometime. I'm glad we had a chance to talk." These phrases don't promise anything specific, but they leave the door open. Now let's move into how people end conversations that were more personal. When a conversation has depth, native speakers acknowledge it. "Thanks for sharing that with me. I appreciate you opening up. That meant a lot to hear." These closings show respect and emotional awareness. Now let's talk about follow-up language. Sometimes, conversations don't end. They pause. Advanced speakers signal continuation. "I'll think about what you said. Let's talk more about this later. I'll let you know how it goes." These phrases keep connections alive without pressure. Now let's focus on how native speakers leave group conversations. They don't announce it loudly. They say, "I'm going to step out for a bit. I'm going to grab a coffee. I'll catch up with you later." These exits feel smooth and socially aware. Now let's talk about ending conversations when time is limited. Advanced speakers respect time clearly. "I only have a minute. But I've got to run." Unfortunately, I wish I had more time. These phrases balance honesty and politeness. Now let's talk about energy at the end of conversations. Native speakers don't drop energy suddenly. They soften it. They smile. Their tone warms slightly. Their words slow down. This emotional shift signals closure more than words do. Now let's move into something important, reflecting briefly before ending. Advanced speakers sometimes summarize the connection. It sounds like you're at an interesting point right now. I'm glad things are moving in a good direction for you. These reflections show listening and care. Now imagine ending a conversation with someone you've just met. You might say, "Well, it was really nice meeting you. I hope we run into each other again." Simple, genuine, natural. Now, let's talk about endings in professional contexts again. Native speakers often say, "Thanks again for your time. I appreciate the discussion. Let's stay aligned." These phrases close conversations cleanly. Now, let's address something subtle, not over-explaining at the end. Advanced speakers don't justify leaving. They don't say too much. They keep it light and clear. Now pause for a moment. Notice how these endings feel calm and confident. There's no rush, no awkwardness. Ending well is a skill, and like all skills, it improves with awareness and practice. In the final part, we'll bring everything together. We'll talk about how to maintain this level of English long-term, how to keep improving naturally, and how to trust your voice as an advanced English speaker. Stay with it. You're about to complete the full masterclass. Now let's bring everything together and talk about what it really means to live at an advanced level of English. Not just study it, not just practice it occasionally, but carry it with you naturally in daily life. At this point, English is no longer something you use. It's something you inhabit. Advanced speakers don't think about grammar rules while speaking. They think about meaning, tone, and connection. Their English adapts to the moment because they've trained instinct, not memory. This is the mindset shift that matters most. You stop asking, "Is this correct?" You start asking, "Does this sound natural? Does this reflect how I actually feel? Does this fit the situation?" That's real fluency. Now let's talk about how to maintain and deepen this level long term. The most advanced speakers don't constantly study English. They expose themselves to it intentionally. They listen to real conversations. They pay attention to how people react. Not just what they say. They notice patterns. This could be through podcasts, interviews, HDs, casual YouTube content, or conversations with real people. The key is authenticity. If the English feels slightly messy, slightly imperfect, that's good. That's real. Now let's talk about active listening as a lifelong habit. When you listen to native speakers, don't ask yourself, "Do I understand every word?" Ask instead, "Do I understand the direction of the conversation?" Advanced listening is about flow, not detail. Missing a word doesn't matter if you catch the meaning. Now let's talk about speaking growth. At this level, improvement comes from small refinements, better pacing, clearer stress, more natural reactions. You don't need to speak more. You need to speak with awareness. Record yourself occasionally, not to judge, but to observe. Ask yourself, do I sound relaxed? Do I allow pauses? Do I react naturally? These questions guide progress. Now let's address confidence one last time. Confidence at an advanced level is quiet. It's the confidence to pause. The confidence to say, "I'm not sure." The confidence to let your accent exist. Native speakers don't expect perfection from you. They expect presence. When you're present, People listen. Now let's talk about identity. At a certain point, English becomes part of who you are, not something separate. You don't switch into English mode. You simply speak. That's when your voice matters most. Your experiences, your opinions, your way of seeing the world. Advanced English is not about sounding like someone else. It's about expressing yourself clearly in another language. Now take a moment. Think about how far you've come. The hesitation you used to feel. The silence that used to scare you. The moments you avoided speaking. Those moments don't control you anymore. You now have tools, instincts, and awareness. And most importantly, you have permission to sound human. Now let's talk about one final habit. Speak even when you don't feel ready. That's how readiness is built. Every real conversation is practice. Every imperfect sentence is progress. Don't wait for confidence to appear. Let confidence follow action. Now, as we close this masterclass, remember this. Fluency is not speed. Fluency is not perfection. Fluency is ease. Ease with yourself. Ease with others. Ease with language. Thank you for spending this time with me here on English in Mastery. If this lesson helped you feel more natural, more confident, and more connected to real English, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss future sessions. Keep listening. Keep speaking. Keep trusting your voice. This is not the end of your journey. It's the level where English finally feels like yours. Before we truly finish, let's add one final layer. This is not extra content. This is integration. This is where everything you've listened to becomes something you actually carry with you. Without effort, advanced English is not a performance you turn on. It's a state you return to. Native speakers don't wake up thinking about how they'll speak today. They simply enter conversations as themselves. That's the level you're moving toward now. So let's talk about what this looks like in real life. Day after day, you walk into a cafe. You order without rehearsing. You react naturally if something goes wrong. You smile. Adjust. Move on. You join a conversation. You listen more than you speak. You react first, then respond. You don't rush to sound impressive. You share your thoughts. You don't over-explain. You don't apologize for pauses. You trust simple language. This is advanced fluency in action. Now let's talk about something many learners don't hear enough. You are allowed to sound like you. Advanced English does not erase your personality. It reveals it. Some people are calm. Some are expressive. Some are reflective. Some are direct. There is no single native personality to copy. There are millions. Your goal is not to sound American, British, or Australian. Your goal is to sound natural, clear, and present. Now let's talk about mistakes one last time. At this level, mistakes are not errors. They are variations. Native speakers constantly change sentences midway. They choose a better word halfway through. They abandon ideas and restart. You've heard this throughout the lesson. So, when you hesitate, don't label it as failure. Label it as thinking. When you pause, don't apologize. Use the pause. When you forget a word, don't freeze. Describe it. Move forward. That's what fluent speakers do. Now let's talk about long-term growth without burnout. You don't need to study harder. You need to stay connected. Listen to English you enjoy. Speak when it feels relevant. Notice patterns casually. If English becomes heavy, you're doing too much. Fluency grows best when language is tied to meaning, not pressure. Now let's talk about confidence again. But this time very clearly. Confidence is not loud. Confidence is not fast. Confidence is not certainty. Confidence is comfort with uncertainty. When you can say, "I'm not sure," without feeling small, you're fluent. When you can pause without panic, you're fluent. When you can express yourself without translating, you're fluent. Now let's close this masterclass properly. Not with advice, not with rules, but with permission. Permission to speak imperfectly. Permission to sound human. Permission to take your time. Your English does not need approval. It needs use. Every conversation you have from now on reinforces what you've built here. So take this with you. Into meetings, into casual chats, into quiet moments, into moments where you don't know what to say yet. That's where fluency lives. Thank you for staying with this masterclass from beginning to end. This is English, and this is the level where English stops being something you learn and starts being something you live. Keep going. Your voice is ready.